We squash this to a whole thing into 2 days, which then signals to the client that, all right, this guy is on it. I need to step up. Let me clear up some time in my calendar so I can actually execute alongside this person, as opposed to the other approach where they just sit and wait. And there's like, okay, if I wait, they can wait as well for my deliverables. That's what we signal to them. So build momentum and think about that kind of first deliverable, how we can do that as quickly as possible.
Welcome to the Agency Profit Podcast, a show dedicated to going deep space on agency operations, which is just as nerdy as it sounds. I'm your host, Marcel and Vito. I'm the CEO of Parakeeto, a firm that helps digital and creative agencies measure and improve their profitability. Join me as I interview some of the smartest thought leaders and agency owners in our space and go deep into operations, metrics, and all the other things you need to get right so you can spend less time worrying about operations and more time executing on your vision. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Agency Profit Podcast. I'm excited today to be joined by an old friend and somebody you might recognize from the podcast if you've been listening for an incredibly long time, like for 4+ years. It's Vito Peleg. He's the CEO of a platform called Atarim that is helping thousands of agency teams around the world streamline the way that they collaborate and build great deliverables for their clients, especially when it comes to design development of web projects. And he's here today to share his thesis and his observations on where AI is taking the industry, what the opportunities are for you to improve how efficiently you get things done and improve your profitability, from being one of the first people that I know to even be working with this stuff before it went mainstream. So with all of that, Vito, thank you for making the time to be on the show today.
Of course, my pleasure. It's good to see you again, Marcel.
Good to see you too, man. So I've given everyone a little bit of context on what you do, but in your own words, who do you serve and what do you do?
So we help design teams, creatives collaborate with each other. And basically our platform is a creative collaboration and workflow management system. We're currently serving 69,000 teams that are using our solution with 1.7 million of their team member stakeholders and clients. This is from freelancers to some of the largest agencies in the world, a bunch of huge fulfillment teams that sometimes run thousands of projects through the system per month.
Now, you've been doing this for a while now. What motivated you to start building Atarim? What's sort of the quick backstory on how you discovered that there was a challenge here and decided to build software to solve it?
So if I take you a little bit before we even met, Marcel, back in the day, I used to be a touring musician, playing in the rock band. And while we were touring, doing more than 200 shows per year, living in a van, essentially, I was building websites from the back of the van and trying to serve clients in the early 2010s, before 4G, before 3G even. It was about stealing Wi-Fi from McDonald's as you're driving past. So I think that first gave me a nice a kind of perspective on remote collaboration, especially when it comes to creative work, a little bit before most folks. And then once I turned 30, and it was nice to live in a smelly van with 4 other guys, that's when I settled here in London and started building a web agency. And we delivered hundreds and hundreds of projects from web to branding to even dashboards and web apps for startups that wanted to test out ideas. And the problem of collaboration with clients, getting them to give us the information on time and with high quality, was just a constant, as you probably know from your background as well. And so it kind of boiled down to this moment: is that why can't they just click any part of the page and just leave a comment where the problem is? And that was the version 1 of the product, which was started as a WordPress plugin back in the day. It ended up being the biggest launch in the history of WordPress by a newcomer. And we've been building ever since and solving this problem. Now we're able to cut deliveries between 50 to 70% or so.
Yeah. So that statistic is just staggering when you as the profitability guy, if I think about cutting the cost of doing a project and potentially cutting the timeline of doing a project by 50 to 70%. And I think about the impact that has not only on profitability, but also on cash flow. It's incredible. That is worth
final deposit way faster. That's really is the
way
magic
quicker.
the whole cycle just accelerates. The referrals, everything works around this for sure.
Yeah, you're earning revenue so much quicker. You're probably also reducing the amount of dependencies that end up causing major utilization issues. I mean, we talk about this all the time. Some of the biggest risks to utilization is you had the work, but something blocked your team from being able to work on that thing. So even though you theoretically had the work and the revenue, the team's sitting on their hands because the client hasn't got the revisions back or they haven't provided access to the thing or whatever. So yeah, this is, I think it's a really compelling problem. Now, let's dig into that. I mean, you've now seen this over a very long time horizon across literally millions of projects. Why is this such a huge problem? Why is the collaboration one of the biggest sort of cost centers in a delivery project? And why do people still struggle with it as much as they do?
Right. So first of all, let's frame it, frame the problem itself. So, most people underestimate what it is actually when it comes to the component within the project. And so we ran a bunch of surveys and we looked at within our community to try and understand that gap. And what we found is that there is an inherent increase of between 500 to 700% in the delivery time for every project that needs to be worked on, either with stakeholders, clients, or even internally within a team. I'll give you a couple of examples. Let's say we're doing a small business website as just an example. Most people would say that on their own, if they have everything they need, they can do it in about 3 to 5 days. Right now with AI, maybe even faster. But if you got everything you need a 5-pager for your sister or something, 3 days, I'm in and out, you know. But when it comes to the exact same project with a client, this moves up to between 4 to 6 weeks on average. And that's just like that example. We see this at every different level of scale. You know, how many times we've had these projects where the developers came in or someone from the team came in and said like, yeah, in 6 months, this is done. And then a year and a half, people are still tinkering with it. But even at a smaller scale, I like to give the example of just like doing a single slide, you know, just a single flyer or something like that. If I do a slide in Canva or PowerPoint or something like this, if you know what you're doing, in 5 minutes, you're out. But if I need you to approve this, Marcel, if we need to work on this together, we're already in the 30 minutes, 40 minutes, and that's in core work time. But exactly like you described, it's the dead time that gets us, because that 5-minute task would probably take about a week of me waiting for you, you waiting for me, let's get on a call, let's do all this kind of stuff. So 500 to 700% increase in the delivery time is standard in our space, which is insane. And why? Why does this happen? Mostly because the way that we're trying to well, it breaks on a couple of fronts. The main thing is that we're trying to communicate stuff that are visual in textual means. And, you know, people say an image is worth 1,000 words, and that is definitely true for creative work that are visual in nature. And so we're trying to work with emails, Slack, and project management tools that lack that visual component, and then we resort to a bunch of screenshots and Google Docs that have all kinds of annotations, spreadsheets, and things like that. And that flags to the second problem here, which is that human feedback by design is 3 to 5 words. You know, the way that we communicate these things is usually 3 to 5 words. It's like make this bigger, or make this stronger, you know, or stuff like that, or change this to green. You know what I'm talking about because I'm pointing at it, and all you need is 3 to 5 words. Change this text to this, you know, that kind of stuff. But the way that we request this from stakeholders, even within the team, is way more than what is the human experience. And so you would ask for the screenshot and the browser and the screen size, and what are you on your phone, and are you this on your tablet? Can you share the exact URL of this thing? What did you have for breakfast, and where are you trying to get to? You know, all of it becomes a report for these 3 to 5 words that are just kind of like sitting there around it. And it's not that it's not correct. That's the context that we need to actually understand the problem if it's done in a textual way. But it breaks in terms of in terms of the user experience. The UX gets us. And so what you get is procrastination. What you get is that kind of delay of getting to this until we get on the call, so I can just blurb it out, you know, instead of needing to do the tedious work of putting it in that spreadsheet and all of those kind of things that is common that we ask people to do, or even inside Jira tasks and all these kind of stuff, And so the two things together, one is one is the fact that we're not using visual means, and the other part is the part that it's just not, that doesn't lean into what we do naturally. This is what creates usually that 500 to 700%, and you see that as team coordination gaps, scope creep that is coming in, a lot of back and forth clarification cycles. In fact, that's another interesting stat. We found that 68% of all creative communications that are done in text, in emails and things like that, are too vague to action in the first shot. So they require that clarification cycle of you coming to me and it's like, what the hell are you talking about, Vito? Let's get on a call and show me what you mean, and all this kind of stuff. And so it's literally more than 2/3 of all of these communications, and that clarification cycle on average is a week. It's like I mentioned with that slide within a deck. It doesn't matter the scope of work. It's just that dead time in between that makes it be a week on average. So already we're losing from the get-go knowing that kind of figure.
Okay. I'm sure there's a lot of people that are listening that are really resonating with all of the things that you've just described, right? This is like the inherent friction that you feel when you're collaborating with a client on a creative deliverable. I want to get a little more tactical here as well. I mean, you are able to see from sort of the very beginning of a project all the way through to delivery. If you were to summarize, what are some of the key places where you find agencies are losing the most efficiency in the delivery process? When you think about everything from in the initial sort of onboarding and strategy, collecting, the assets, the copy, the things that you need access to get started, the designs, the revision cycles, the QA, where are some of the places where you see the biggest opportunity for efficiency improvements?
I would say, first of all, it's about building momentum from the get-go. That's usually what gets most. And so think of this scenario, Marcel. Let's say we just started a brand new project. You just paid me a small deposit to get started on this, and the first thing that I do is send you off to get the content, right? And not only that, usually I would tell you that you have 2 weeks to get the content. And that frames it from multiple wrong ways. First of all, it doesn't take 2 weeks to create a content for, if we keep that example of a small website, it doesn't take 2 weeks. It takes 2 hours if you know what you're doing, and especially with AI nowadays, that's even way quicker. If you know what you're doing. But as we signal to clients, a lot of times these 2 weeks, 3 weeks kind of time spans, it's very hard for them to fit this into their calendar, because to them, they don't know how long these things truly take. They just accept it as what you said, that it's a 2-week type of process. Where do I start? How do I go about this? And just by framing it like that, we guarantee that it will never end up within a calendar. And that's the key. That's the key element of that. If we one cool tip that I like to give to solve this problem is there's a concept called 2 days and a weekend. So if you know that you have a short deliverable that you want to move quickly, instead of saying like, what do you think? Or I need this in 2 weeks, or you have a week to reply, or all this kind of stuff. 2 days and a weekend, because that means that it gets the person thinking when. And and if I don't do it in the next 2 days, I need to do it on the weekend, and most wouldn't want to, And so then you see them opening up the calendar and starting to fit this in, and then you know that it's going to get done. Because procrastination is what it's all about, is that, again, as you mentioned, those gaps between action. And so that's one component. Then from the other side, how can we contribute to this from our perspective? One thing that I really like as a concept that we did constantly at the agency, and we even do that as a product now, it's a key element of building SaaS as well, is that you want to provide value as soon as you can, as soon as possible, really. And what often happens is that we get on this, they pay the deposit, We either send them off for 2 weeks or we schedule that discovery call that is then going to be in a few days. And after the discovery call, we go off to the background and do our work for a bunch of time until we come back with something. But if we can accelerate that initial part of the project, for example, imagine that you come to me and we just signed the contract and I tell you, all right, thank you very much. Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m., we have a discovery session. We're going to go through all of the stuff together. I have my questions, and we're going to make sure that we're on the same page as to what we want to build. By the end of the discovery session, sometimes 90 minutes, sometimes 4 hours, depending on the scope. Within a matter of minutes, you can deliver. If we're talking about a website, a sitemap. That's a super simple deliverable. The point is not the sitemap. The point is to find that simple deliverable that is relevant to your space that you can ship within minutes after that initial call to get that first approval the day after, right? So see what happened. Instead of stretching the first 2 weeks to just do the discovery session until you actually provide some sort of tangible value, which is the first deliverable that will come after, instead of that, we squash this by breaking it down to something smaller. We squash this to a whole thing into 2 days, which then signals to the client that, all right, this guy is on it. I need to step up. Let me clear up some time in my calendar so I can actually execute alongside this person, as opposed to the other approach where they just sit and wait. And there's like, okay, if I wait, then they can wait as well for my deliverables. That's what we signal to them. So build momentum and think about that kind of first deliverable, how we can do that as quickly as possible.
Yeah, that resonates. And, I think another place that I hear a lot of people struggle with is any juncture where there's an approval. This tends to happen with design, the transition from design to development, and then, of course, the sort of finalization and QA process, where, to your point, there's just things that aren't clear, things that weren't aligned. And a lot of that, I think, can be attributed back to the way that communication is often happening, or, in some cases, just the nature of clients, where it's like it's easier for them to articulate what they don't like than it is to articulate what they do like and what they do want.
Yeah. So put something in front of them as quickly as possible.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's, it's interesting. I've had some conversations recently about this where, even just like among the team, we have some different personality types. There's some people that get stuff in front of me very, very quickly and very early. That's in their nature. And other people that like to hold things close to their chest and they feel like they're ready. And often, there's more sunk cost. And so like there is this, I think related to your first point, there is value in getting something in front of the client really, really early. And you can frame, I think the fear is that the client will doubt your capabilities if that first thing is like way off the mark. But there's a lot you can do to frame that, to say like that the goal is for us to put something in front of you right away so you can tell us what you don't like, right? Like you're going to hate this first thing that we show you.
Yeah, it doesn't need to be a complete piece of work. It just needs to be a simple, small step. And that's really is that kind of learning curve that a client needs to go through as they go on a project with us. And sometimes we forget this because we're in the trenches, we're doing the same work every day. And to us, it seems supernatural, but most of the folks we work with are not, that's not their day to day. They have other stuff that they're dealing with. And that's why they hired us, in fact, So giving them that courtesy of just like, here's the first step. Have a look at this. Here's a crude wireframe, or again, a sitemap or some sort of a brand voice that you can churn out with ChatGPT within minutes nowadays. Something. It doesn't matter what it is, as long as it kind of frames that, all right, I made a deposit into our relationship already minutes after we started,
So you've mentioned AI a couple of times, and I think that's a really important thing for us to dig into today. The first thing to note is that you were pretty early to AI, as it relates to these language models that you can interact with. And you have now, of course, started working with this inside of your software company. And I think you have an interesting perspective on just like how AI is influencing the way that agencies create and deliver projects to their clients and where that's headed. So with all of that in mind, the tidal wave of AI is coming. I think everyone's talking about it. How do you see this impacting the way that, let's say, a web design and development agency looks a few years into the future, and the biggest places where you think that's disrupting the way things are done today?
And so I'll start by saying that the tidal wave is here. We're about to drown if we don't ride it, and so it's important. And the reason why I'm saying it like this is because I also know that the vast majority of agencies have not leaned in, like in some other industries. You would have expected that would be the case, because it's such a resource heavy model, the agency model. And so whatever resources we can free up, that's amazing. That goes directly into our bottom line. So you'd think you'd have a lot more adoption in the world of in the agency world when it comes to AI, but the stats say otherwise, which is very interesting to see. So come on, let's all do it. We gotta lean in. That's really is the world that we're living in right now. And the way that I look at this from, if I boil it down, first of all, from a product perspective, sorry, from a web creation perspective, it feels there's two fundamental shifts that are happening right now in front of our eyes that I think are very exciting for the agency model. One is that we're experiencing a change in UI once again. And what do I mean by this? And that's also contributes to the collaboration problem, because back in the day, Marcel, you remember to build a page, you'd need to code the whole thing from scratch, right? It took about 10 hours to do what now in those kind of WordPress or Wixes or web flows, you can do in about 30 minutes. That looks 10 times better. So that creation time was very much balanced to that to what I mentioned with that massive collaboration time. It used to be very balanced in the beginning, but then that shrunk. And the other one is still done with emails and spreadsheets, and that's why it still looks the same, basically. But that shrunk dramatically when that shift happened, and the UI or the interface moved from us typing and coding the whole thing into drag and dropping, creating rectangles, right? That was kind of the day-to-day life of a designer, just a rectangle master. And now we're seeing that same shift moving again. The UI is changing and it's back into the keyboard, maybe voice soon, but we're back into kind of prompting and saying what we want. And then the tool just does the work like we did with the mouse, So that alone, as these tools get a little bit better and better, I can see that dramatically reducing the creation time compared to even what we've experienced before, which is only going to highlight that collaboration is no longer 500 to 700%. It's going to be 5,000 to 7,000% increase compared to how long it takes you to make, Even now, you saw like the latest Google model. By the time this is going to go out, there's going to be 7 more. But the one that we're experiencing right now, the Nano Banana, is everyone is talking about how you can do a bunch of stuff that we used to do at the agency through Photoshop, and it took hours. And now it's just a matter of minutes, So we're already walking in this space that we're typing instead of drag and dropping and utilizing tools. The AI does it on its own, and in the world of MCPs and all of that, it's only going to be done even further. So that's one component. And the other side of it is that, especially for design, the same shift that happened then is happening now in a deeper way. And what do I mean by this? So back then, if you wanted to code the website, you had to first design it in Photoshop, right? That was like the standardized tool for doing this kind of stuff at the time. And then you'd get the design from the designer, and then you'd code the page up to kind of match it pixel perfect before responsive stuff, that use case died completely, and that killed for Adobe. It killed that use case completely, and that brought the rise of Figma because people got used to building in the browser, right? And so instead of you needing to design every basic landing page or every basic homepage before you needed to code it up, you can now drag and drop, and you just do it in the browser. So you get to the result way quicker, and you skip the step that was standard in the past. And now the way I see this is happening once again, but for more complex interfaces. And that's where the big opportunity is for agencies specifically, because we're already using these types of tools, but a lot of times because of the talent that we're able to afford, or the talent or the skills that we have, it confines us to the smaller projects that we can drag and drop in the Wixes, in the WordPress, in the web flows, of the world. But if we want to do anything more complex than that, then we go through the process of designing in Figma, handing it to a developer, and they would code the whole thing up, right? Exactly like we used to do back then. But now that is gone. So that Figma stage, I think, is going to be eliminated. And we can even see them leaning into this exact same thesis with the release of Figma sites, because for them, the biggest threat is the lovables, the vibe coders of the world, the cursors, where you can create something straight away, skipping that design stage to begin with, and then iterating right where you're at, And so that's why Figma sites, I think, is where they would go with this. And it's going to be great for them, I believe. I think they can capture a really nice market share on the back of that, competing with the Lavables, with the Bolts, and, all these kind of folks. But the world of us doing complete UI and building those prototypes and all these kind of stuff inside Figma, I think that's over. And so from an agency perspective, the quicker you lean into this new reality, now there is a time of in between where clients don't anticipate it to be that quick. And so the prices can remain the same, even though the time that it takes you to do the work, as we mentioned before, can be cut by sometimes 90% compared to going through the entire process, the traditional process. And so there's a huge opportunity at the moment. But I think that one of the challenges that we will face in the future is that as people realize that it's easier, on one hand, I don't think it's going to kill the agency model at all, because not everyone wants to fix their own car. You still need someone to fix the car. Here in the UK, you invite people to change your light bulbs. I don't know if that's something there, but you have the guy that comes in, changes the light bulbs. It's crazy in my mind. It's not how I grew up, So there's always going to be people that want you to do stuff for them, and that's where the skills and the agencies come in to wrangle all of these tools in sequence, or to choose the right paths to actually execute on the work through these tools. But the expectations from us are going to rise, and going to rise dramatically. I don't even know to where. But the history tells us that this is always what happens when there's a new advance in technology. When things become simpler, then the expectation from the professionals rise exponentially. And so we need to figure that out as well as an industry.
Do you want some free resources to help you measure and improve your profitability? If you do, then I want to tell you about our Agency Profitability Toolkit, which you can grab absolutely free in the show notes or by heading to parakeeto.com/toolkit. It's packed with training videos, cheat sheets, templates, and all kinds of other great resources to help you start measuring and improving the essential metrics that are going to drive better profitability in your business. And it's helped thousands of other agencies around the world do the same. So I want to encourage you to go and grab a copy of that. And if you'd rather get in the fast lane and just have our team of experts guide you through the process of measuring and improving your profitability, then I want to encourage you to apply for a consultation at parakeeto.com. With that, I want to thank you again for tuning in. I hope you enjoy the episode, and I'll let you get back to it. Yeah. You raised a couple of things that I think are really interesting. And, the first one being this shift in the process for how a website gets created, and steps just all sort of getting compressed. And to your point, you can log into any of these builders and write a prompt and deploy a website in literally minutes. And what's, I think, historically created some friction with designers is they're used to being able to go and manipulate something very specific. And historically, that was not easy to do with AI models. You would prompt it and you're prompting the whole design. But very quickly, they're getting much better where you can select a specific element and prompt for that. So you're starting to develop the level of specificity and control that I think a lot of designers, once you get used to having that, it's hard to regress in terms of saying I want this button to be this color and have this, right? But if you have all that technical skill set and then you can achieve that same outcome with a prompt, it starts to actually lower the technical barrier of needing to understand how to do all that inside of something like Figma. So that's, I think, a big shift that hopefully will start to increase the adoption. But I can understand why someone who could achieve anything that was in their brain in Figma because they understood how to do it, that it would feel like a regression to go to prompting the whole page and then having the thing change and then 10 other things they didn't want to change too. It's just frustrating, right? But the other thing I think is interesting, I spoke with a gentleman at a conference I was speaking at recently who is the head of web AI at Google. And I asked him, will we even have websites in the future? Like, what do you think the web looks like in the future? And he had a really interesting take, which I think furthers your point, which is like, there's a point in time when maybe we're not actually building any human readable UIs for the web, and the entire web is rendered in real time by the AI chat or browser or interface that we're using. And what you're just really referencing is like, is code or context, and the UI is being generated dynamically for that specific user to present the information that is contained on your air quotes site. And the idea that you have to learn how to interact with the user interface of a given website won't even be a factor anymore in web, which like completely reshapes the concept of what that could look like. Now it's a little bit off into the future, but it's not crazy to think that that's where we could end up.
Yeah, and I can see that for sure. But I'll also caveat that with 2 years ago, we were all thinking that we'd be walking around with these massive goggles on our head by now, and that didn't happen. And so, but even there at this time, there was a bunch of discussions of how would websites look in this reality, So, and then basically all of the thoughts came back to like a mall, like a physical mall that you would go into a shop and you can design it like you design your physical shop, and have the whole thing kind of stand out, So for sure, it will and even if we're looking at it from a browser perspective, websites have changed so much over the past couple of decades already. If you go to Berkshire Hathaway, you can see that they have the kind of their crappy website that is brilliant, and that kind of gives you a perspective of where this whole thing started, really not that long ago. And so we're definitely moving in all kinds of interesting directions, but still somewhere we need to build it.
That's so funny that you mentioned that. I posted on LinkedIn about the Berkshire website recently, and like literally some of these hyperlinks go to like a Word doc. It's crazy. If you haven't been to the Berkshire Hathaway website, please go. It is incredible, and this is literally like one of the biggest companies in the world by market cap. It's wild.
And you know what I love about this specifically is that like their brand is that they have no brand, and that's why it looks like this. It's like completely stripped out of anything. But by that they create the brand, which is also cool.
It is sort of the Berkshire is the ultimate sort of dedication to the idea of a meritocracy, of just like all we need to do is be the best in the world at making investors money, which is what they have been unequivocally by a country mile for decades, and it seems to have worked for them. Just like nothing else matters but being the best in the world at what we do. All right, so you touched on something I think is really important here, which is, AI is increasing the speed and compressing essentially the amount of time and energy that goes into the actual creation of the deliverable. And what that is placing an emphasis on is like the actual majority of the cost and the majority of the time, both in terms of absolute, but also like relative in terms of timeline. The majority of the inefficiency in projects comes down to collaboration. And so how do you see AI changing the way we do that? And where's the opportunity, knowing that that is going to increasingly become a higher and higher proportion of the cost that we have to incur and the delays that we end up having to incur in these projects?
So first of all, it comes from what would that reality eventually look like, and I think that really not even that far off, like 3-5 years from now, you're going to have basically, or agencies are going to be more of a marketing activity than anything else. Now we're thinking about them as creatives, and you have all of these skill sets that you're bringing to the table, which are important for authority, especially if you're thinking about this from an agency owner perspective, which I assume is the majority of our listeners. From an agency owner perspective, if you're doing it right, you're not in the weeds anymore. You're orchestrating a team that are in the weeds, And so imagine that reality where you have no restrictions on staff, like you can scale as much as you can sell. And that is really maybe what is SaaS, if you think about this. But I think that this is where a lot of this is going, where you would have those hordes of agents that as much as you can fulfill, you can. and there is no cap to it, just as much as you can sell. And so I think that's a very interesting shift in that term, because a lot of us don't see ourselves as service providers at all. We see ourselves as the artist, as the talent. But in fact, if you are at the stage of being an agency owner, you are no longer that. You are the authority that commands over talent, commands over actions that are happening elsewhere. So I think that's a much more healthy approach to kind of looking at it, and so that's one thing that we have to realize, that this is probably where this whole thing is going, because the cycle is going to get closed, and all you can do is just onboard customers to fit the workflow and use case and the batch of tools that you decided to leverage, which is, again, very similar to how we handle ourselves today. Some agencies focus on this stack of tools to do cold outreach, let's say, and another agency focus on this stack of tools to do AI automation. Another agency focus this stack of tools to do Webflow, Figma Webflow type of stuff, and so on and so on. It's just a selection of what we want to lean into and bring those things together to create an offer, that is the complete thing, based on a few different tools that we're leveraging. So I think that this is a very important thing to kind of consider from this perspective, because that is going to completely shift the way that we work. I even think it's not going to be about, now we're talking in dev hours, like this is going to be like 800 dev hours. But maybe the way that we'll be talking about this is that this is a 8 billion prompt project. 8 billion tokens project. Let's price it that, so that we can understand our unit economics, because most of the costs are actually going to be done through there rather than dev hours. And then when it comes to the human component of needing to collaborate, I think it's going to get reduced by all of this, but people will still want to give their opinions, because feedback is subjective, and so as long as people have ideas and they're coming with different views and different perspectives and different skill sets into the review process, they would want to voice their opinions, so I don't think that that's going to go away, but there's a bunch of things that we can do to mitigate the gaps, the dead time in between, whether this is things like simply automating follow-ups, that are smartly automated, or automating the responses, which is something that support teams are already doing. In the agency world, it hasn't come in as strong yet, because we kind of value that personal connection, personal touch with the client, which is valid with some activities, but some things can be automated. So for example, we have the same perspective in our support. Our support agents are there. You don't talk to AI when you first reach out to our support. You speak to a human in under 40 seconds. But our agents have access to AI that has the knowledge base and has all of these kind of stuff. So they use that to be way more effective when they do the communications way quicker, so that you don't have those massive lag. On a support ticket, it's very apparent. If you don't reply within the first 5 to 7 minutes, then it's probably going to be a day at least until the cycle continues. So you lost a day in closing the ticket if you're not able to solve it within the first few minutes. And if you have the tools and the information available to you, you don't need to go off and ask other people and figure it out, and you just prompt it and get the answer and bring it back. And obviously, you will probably be within that 5 to 7 minute window, which meant that you now saved the day. And so all of these kind of things in Atarim, in one thing that I really liked in one of the implementation that we did with the new AI is clarification cycles. And so what if when someone leaves you a comment that is vague, someone tells you, I don't know about this one, right? Or like a make it pop kind of thing. And instead of you needing to see this a few hours later, do slap your forehead and then come back to the client and say, okay, that doesn't mean anything. Oh, did you mean this? Did you mean that? And let's get on a call. All of this nonsense. What if it happens instantly? And this is really what Claro, the kind of project manager agent that we've created, does. Intercepts and kind of like Grammarly checks for grammar, it checks for clarity. And if the threshold breaks, then it comes in and runs a clarification cycle on the spot, observing the context and giving the client the suggestions, saying like, it was pretty vague. Maybe you meant that the text should be smaller, that there's a misprint on the word, things like that.
I think it's funny you mentioned that, and that's like one of the first things that I thought of was like reducing that feedback cycle. And I my prediction is that another thing that will end up becoming leveraged is, the level of technical proficiency that you need to visualize something that's in your mind using AI is getting lower all the time. And I think this has historically been one of the biggest challenges for clients is articulating, like they don't have the language to articulate what they want, and they don't have the technical proficiency to show you what they want. And therefore that's the game of ping pong is they say something, the designer interprets it, puts something back in front of them. It's not quite right. They say something else. And that's like the back and forth. And like, is it possible that to some degree, the AI will actually become a tool that the client can use to try and get closer to an articulation that the designer can then use to get to the outcome that everyone's happy with in fewer feedback cycles?
Yeah, to see a preview and then send that to the client,
right?
Or almost to the professional, yeah,
right. Or almost a visual feedback of like, when you say this is what it's going to mean to the designer, right? Or this is how it'll be interpreted. And like, is this accurate? Is this in the right direction, right? So that is like a simple but very powerful idea.
100%.
Huh. Now, I know we're getting to time, Vito, and you've got some exciting stuff going on with Atarim, some exciting new AI stuff that's coming out, which is cool because I feel like you were early to AI, but you've also been really intentional about not just like releasing it too early. And I know you spent a lot of time making sure that this is working really well and it's like a legitimate use case before you get this out in the product. So with all of that, for people that want to learn more about what you're doing with Atarim, where should we send them in the show notes to check it out?
Atarim.io, Atarim.io. And you can find everything that you need over there. We basically built the first agentic creative team. And it's a bold statement, and I think that there's a few firsts there that we've created to elevate the experience for the agencies. Currently, as we speak here, this is in early access, so we have a few thousand people that are giving us feedback on a daily basis. We shift things, and your idea of that preview was also mentioned as part of the feedback that we brought there, and found itself on the found its way to the roadmap as well. There's already a path to doing exactly what you're describing with the technologies that we have available, and so it's very, very exciting. Really, the way that I think is a little bit different, or maybe a lot different, in the way that we're approaching this compared to every other application that is out there. There's a couple actually. First of all, if you think about it, Marcel, every AI implementation in the world, every one that I've seen out there is always one-to-one. It's just you and the AI. It's you and Gemini, you and Cursor, you and even in Slack. It's an experience. Their AI implementation is summarizing messages for you, the front-facing user, or giving you better search, things like that. But because Atarim is at its core a collaborative platform, we've leaned into that, and we've created the first implementation where you have multiple humans collaborating with multiple agents, all in real time and all within the context. And so when you start a thread, you and me can talk to the AI together. They can bring responses. We have multiple agents that will feed off of each other and suggest to each other. And I'll give an example there. If the Pixel, who is the designer, comes in to say like the margins here are a little bit off and we need to change the color of the text. Navi, she's in charge of accessibility, might chime in straight away and say, I ran this through my contrast checker tool, and I found that this Pixel suggestion is not going to be accessible. So maybe we should do something else. And he will come back and say, okay, you're right. Let's use this one. And then your designer can come in and say like, okay, this is what I ended up using. The project manager wraps it all up and they all talk within the same thread. And as far as I know, this is the very first time that something like this is released to the market. So that's one thing that I'm really excited about. And then also from the way that we're kind of looking at these agents is a little bit different, where most AI or most people look at AI as additional tools. But we're leaning into the concept of they're not the tool. The interface that we've built over the past 7 years almost, that interface that allows you to click any part of the page, leave comments, assign and talk to each other, like the collaboration and workflow interface, that's the tool. What sits inside and has been sitting inside for the past 7 years is the team, is the humans that were collaborating with each other. So what if we don't look at them as just an additional tool? They are the team. And then if as we started looking at them from this perspective, then it's a matter of what does the team do? What are the workflows that we do as team members right now that we can digitize in the form of through the AI? What are the tools that we go out to? Let's say, Marcel, I'm going to ask you to look at my homepage and tell me the keyword. You wouldn't just guess. You would go to SEMrush or Ahref and you maybe to Google, perform some sort of a keyword analysis, figure out what it should be, gain conviction, and then come back with an educated suggestion. That's what a professional would do, right? Just like blurb it out. And so in the same way, we're looking for these different tools that we can give the AI team, and so that they can go off and run a report of this 40-page accessibility report that no one wants to face. And out of that, based on our intent, what are we trying to achieve with this project, surface only the high priority ones that are not going to be, that we can do within our current budget, because we don't want to do all of them. It's going to take 3 years, And so what are the low-hanging fruit or the things that will move the needle the most out of these massive SEO reports, accessibility reports, lighthouse reports for performance, all of these kind of stuff that we do day to day and spend boatload of time just tinkering and looking through figures and numbers instead of just asking the AI, hey man, run a lighthouse report and tell me what are the biggest lifts that I should do, and within 17 seconds you get your first paint is this, your this is that. You should change, remove the headers, remove emojis, things like that are low hanging fruit that we can do.
It's extremely exciting to see how you're building on what was already a great foundation with Atarim and leveraging AI for that. So for those listening, I do encourage you to check the show notes, go check out what Vito's doing there. And with all that, Vito, I appreciate you coming back to the show. It's great to catch up with you after all these years and really excited to see what you're up to.
Thank you, Marcel. It was a pleasure.
Hey, thanks so much for tuning in to today's episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you've ever found yourself thinking, man, I get so much value from this podcast, I wish there was something I could do to return the favor. Well, today's your lucky day because you can leave us a review wherever you're listening to this, and it is incredibly helpful. Of course, if you haven't grabbed a free copy of the Agency Profit Toolkit, go and get that. It's got tons of free resources to help you improve your profitability. If you're looking to get in the fast lane and get help from experts to improve your profitability and measure your most important metrics, then apply for a consultation at Parakeeto.com. We'd love to chat with you and figure out how we can help. With all of that, thank you so much for being a listener, and we will see you on the next episode.